The first time she walked through the marketplace with her triplets, the world seemed to stop. Even the wind paused to listen. 3 little girls, identical as moon reflections on water, dressed in deep indigo from head to toe. Indigo scarves, indigo sashes, indigo sandals, and around each ankle, a small brass bell that refused to ring. At first, the people of Kagara thought it was fashion, but when weeks turned to months and the girls were still seen in nothing but indigo, the laughter faded into whispers. "Are they children? Or spirits?" someone asked. "No spirit needs sandals," another replied, "but I've never seen a bell that cannot speak." Their mother Ebony walked ahead, calm, proud, and unbothered. Her eyes held something too old for tears, too heavy for words. People moved out of her way without knowing why. But once, long before the bells, Ebony had been the woman whose laughter carried through the streets, the woman who sang to the dawn, the wife who waited every season for a cry that never came. Her husband, Kasimu, was patient, at first. He told her, "Maybe next moon, my love, maybe next rain." But patience is a cloth that wears thin. By the 3rd year, the silence between them was louder than the drums in the village square. Neighbors began to talk. 3 years, they said, and her belly is still flat. One auntie whispered too loudly, "A farmer cannot wait forever for a stubborn seed." And before long, Kasimu's family brought another woman into the house, Halima, bright eyes, jingling bracelets, quick to smile. Ebony said nothing. She washed the cooking pots, folded her wrappers, and carried her silence like a second skin. When Halima's belly began to swell, the compound filled with music, praise, and laughter. And still, Ebony said nothing. That night, she lay on her mat and watched the stars through the hole in her roof. 3 stars sitting close together, blinking softly like secret eyes. And she whispered to the night, "If you know my name, call me back to it." Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, her stepmother, Yamisi, came to her door. A woman the village called sharp-tongued, but Ebony called nothing at all. "Come," Yamisi said. "We are going to the river." Ebony frowned. "If this is another prophet with charms and beads, I'm not going." Yamisi only said, "No prophet, the river keeper." They walked for hours through thorn trees and red dust, until the path bent toward the sound of slow-moving water. There, at the bend of Okuru River, stood a small hut. No charms hung on the door, no bones, no smoke, only a single calabash drum resting on 2 stones. A voice came from inside, deep, calm, like shade on a hot day. "Enter, daughter." Inside sat the river keeper, neither young nor old, his hair streaked with grey, his eyes clear like still water. Ebony told him everything: the waiting, the prayers, the silence, the second wife. He listened the way water listens, without judgment, without interruption. When she finished, he said quietly, "Your womb is not empty, child. It is guarded." Ebony's breath caught. "Guarded? By what?" "By a promise you did not make," he said. "By grief that does not belong to you. By names that have not yet been spoken." He struck the calabash drum 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. And the river seemed to shiver. "When life returns to your belly," he said, "tell no one, not your husband, not the one with bracelets, not even the woman who brought you here. You will wear indigo, the color of deep water. And when the children come, you will bind brass bells around their ankles, bells that will never ring until the day a door opens." Ebony whispered, "What door?" He looked out to the current. "One of them will be the door, the gate. When that one breaks the silence, the bells will ring for the first time, and the gate will close behind her. The river," he said, "does not carry 2 boats both ways." He handed her a small gourd sealed with wax. "Soak your indigo in this. Wash their cloth in it every market day, and keep your secrets under your tongue." That night, back home, Ebony felt her moon pause. She smiled into the darkness and said nothing. Not even when her back ached, not even when her belly began to rise. And months later, when the cries filled the house, 1, then 2, then 3, Abeni knew the river had kept its promise. 3 girls, 3 moons on their ears, 3 bells that did not ring. And from that night forward, the people of Kegara began to whisper of a woman whose children wore the color of the river, and whose bells spoke only to silence. The girls grew like vines after rain, tall, bright, full of laughter that tickled the air. They ran barefoot through the yard, their indigo sashes fluttering like restless butterflies, yet always. The bells on their ankles stayed silent. When they laughed, no chime. When they danced, no sound. When they slept, still, the bells slept too. The townspeople began to wonder. Some said the girls were gifts from the gods. Others whispered they were repayment for an old debt. But Abeni never explained. She only smiled. A smile that carried both peace and warning. As the years folded upon themselves, the triplets became known as the Blue Daughters. They walked hand in hand through the market streets, one on the left, one on the right, one in the middle, like 3 echoes of a single song. When they fetched water, the men at the well would stop talking. When they entered the chapel, the candles flickered. Even the chief's wife once said, "Those girls carry silence heavier than thunder." But Abeni never bent to questions. She kept her secret sealed, like the wax on that old gourd from the riverkeeper. Then came the first sign. One evening, when the sun bent low and the air smelled of millet and rain, Abeni heard a faint tremor in her sleep, a sound like a bell trying to remember how to ring. She woke. Heart pounding, all 3 girls lay still, but the smallest, Tari, had her hand stretched toward the window, her fingers twitching in a dream. Abeni whispered a prayer she did not finish, for she remembered the riverkeeper's words. "One will be the gate." The next morning, the girls set off to school. Their indigo dresses caught the light. Their bells still slept, but in the distance, old women crossing the square swore they heard a faint metallic hum, a sound too shy to be real, too soft to be human. Time moved again. The triplets grew into young women, graceful, curious, bold in their quietness. Seni, the eldest, loved to paint, her fingers always stained with blue. Tari, the smallest, sang to birds when she thought no one listened. And Mira, the middle one, was the dreamer, always asking why, always chasing wind. They had learned to live with the silence. They had learned not to ask their mother what it meant, but questions are like smoke. They find a way to escape. One night, Mira sat beside her mother, the moonlight resting on their skin like silver cloth. "Mama," she said softly, "why must we always wear indigo? Why must our bells stay silent?" Abeni didn't answer at first. She folded a wrapper, tied it carefully, then said only, "When the river decides, it will speak." Mira frowned. "The river doesn't speak." "Mama!" Abeni looked up, her eyes dark and distant. "It spoke once." And I listened. The next morning, the girls met at the stream, their favorite place to wash, to dream, to be unseen. The water shimmered like melted sky. Tari sang softly as she scooped water into a gourd. Seni laughed, her hands splashing her sister's, and Mira stared at her reflection, at the indigo cloth, the brass bell, the eyes that seemed to belong to someone older. "Mira," Tari called, "come join us." But Mira didn't answer. She was thinking about freedom, what it might feel like to walk in white, or red or yellow, to let her ankle breathe without the weight of a bell, and deep down, something inside her whispered, "What if I do?" She smiled, a small, dangerous smile, because no one can silence curiosity forever. That night, the rain fell without warning. Abeni lit her lamp, her hands trembling slightly, though she didn't know why. The girls were asleep, or so she thought. But Mira lay awake, eyes open to the dark. Her heart beat slow but heavy. Like a drum deep underwater, she could hear the rain whispering secrets to the roof. And with every drop, the thought grew louder. What if I take it off? She sat up quietly. Her sisters slept beside her, breathing soft, faces calm. The brass bells at their ankles glimmered faintly in the lamplight, mute, motionless. Holy! Mira untied her sash. Her fingers found the small knot that held the bell to her ankle. It had been tied there since the day she was born. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she loosened it. The bell fell into her palm. Warm, heavy, silent. She smiled. It felt like freedom. She placed the bell on the floor and stood up. For the first time in her life, she walked barefoot without the weight of indigo cloth or brass. The cool mud between her toes felt like laughter. She whispered, "So this is what freedom sounds like." She stepped outside. The rain kissed her skin. Soft and clean, she lifted her arms to the sky, and for a brief, golden moment, she felt alive beyond the limits of her mother's silence. Then, it happened. The wind stopped. The air grew still. Every bell in the compound, on her sister's ankles, on the goats, on the temple door, trembled once, and rang SFX, a wave of ringing, small, clear, echoing through the rain. Inside, Abeni woke with a gasp. She knew that sound, the sound that was never meant to come until the gate opened. Her heart sank like a stone dropped into deep water. She ran to the doorway, her wrapper half-tied, her breath broken. "Mira!" she called. "Mira, where are you?" Outside, under the rain, Mira turned. She smiled at her mother, wide and bright. "Mama, look." The bells finally spoke. Abeni's voice broke. No, child. You were not meant to open the river." But the rain drowned her words. Mira took one step toward her, then another, and on the third step, her knees gave way. Her body shivered once, twice, then fell still. The bells kept ringing, but not hers. Hers stayed silent again. Abeni dropped to her knees, lifting her daughter into her arms. "Mira! Mira, wake up! Don't let the river take you." Her voice cracked into the night, but the only answer was the whisper of water returning to the ground. Seni and Tari ran out. Eyes wide, drenched in rain, their bells were still ringing softly, endlessly, like 100 small prayers. "Mama, what's happening?" Tari cried, but Abeni couldn't speak. Her hands trembled around Mira's face. The girl's eyes were open, peaceful, distant, as if she could see somewhere far beyond the rain. Then, slowly, the ringing faded, one by one. Every bell in Kegara went silent again, and the night held its breath. The morning after Mira's death, the sky refused to shine. The sun rose gray, as though it too mourned in silence. In the courtyard, the triplets' blue garments hung from the line, swaying gently in the wind. 3 empty echoes of what once was whole. Abeni sat beside her daughter's still body. Her eyes dry but burning, she had no tears left. Only memory, only understanding too heavy for words. Her 2 remaining daughters knelt beside her, trembling, whispering questions that found no answers. Seni's voice cracked. "Mama?" She just fell. She was smiling. Why did she smile? Abeni's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "She wasn't smiling at us," she said quietly. "She was smiling at the river." Tari clutched her sister's lifeless hand. "Mama, please, we must take her to the healer. Maybe she's only sleeping." But Abeni shook her head. "The healer cannot wake what was promised to sleep." The sisters stared, confused, frightened, desperate. "Mama," Seni cried, "tell us what this means." "Why did the bells ring? Why did she die?" Abeni rose slowly, her wrapper soaked in tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. She looked at them. 2 pieces of her heart that still beat. And for the first time in 20 years, she told them everything. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "When I carried you 3, she began, "I went to the riverkeeper. I begged him to save the lives in my womb. He told me I would have children, 3. But he also told me that the world would not accept them. He said silence would protect you until your time. And when one of you broke that silence, the others would live freely. But she would return to the water." Tari's lips quivered. "So Mira was the gate?" Abeni nodded. She was the gate. The courtyard fell quiet. Even the wind held still. After a long pause, Seni whispered, "Then she saved us." Abeni's hands trembled as she reached for the small brass bell that had fallen from Mira's ankle. It was warm, almost alive. When she lifted it, a faint chime sounded, the gentlest ring. Like a farewell, Tari's tears fell fast. Will she ever come back? Abeni looked toward the distant river. "No one truly leaves the water," she said softly. "She's part of every sound it makes now." That evening, as the village gathered to mourn, Abeni walked with her daughters to Okuru Bend, the place where it had all begun. They dressed Mira in white cloth, not indigo, and laid her by the river's edge. Abeni placed the silent bell on her chest and whispered, "Sleep, my child. The river knows your name." As they stepped back, a soft wind rippled through the reeds. The river shivered, and for one brief heartbeat, every bell in the village chimed together, not in sorrow, but in peace. From that day onward, the indigo faded. Seni painted again, this time with colors she'd never dared to touch. Tari sang without fear, her voice filling every corner of the village, and Abeni, though her heart was broken, finally smiled, a tired, sacred smile, because the curse was gone. Each year, on the day Mira returned to the river, they dressed in blue once more, not as prisoners of prophecy, but as keepers of memory. And when the breeze rolled across the water, if you listened closely, you could hear it, faint, distant, but clear, the ringing of a single bell. A bell that once refused to speak, but now sang for freedom, so they say. The river forgets no promise, and silence is never truly empty. It holds the weight of everything unspoken. Abeni learned that some gifts come wrapped in sorrow, and some destinies demand a sacrifice before joy can enter the house. Seni and Tari lived long after that day, their laughter filling the same streets that once whispered against them. Yet every time they crossed the river, they left a small brass bell by the shore, a reminder that freedom always comes at a cost, and that love, real love, is never without a price. The elders of Kagara tell this story to their children when the moon is full and the water is calm. They say, "If you ever hear a bell ring where no one stands, do not run, do not fear. It is only Mira, the gate, walking home through the river she became. So remember this, my friend, when life keeps you silent, when the world ties bells around your ankles and calls it destiny, do not curse the quiet. Sometimes, silence is the only bridge between what is lost and what must be found."